lot with the men there that were part of the last Arts and Correction program in the whole state of California. If you guys remember, we're going through a budget crisis right now, but things come in cycles. If you guys remember the whole Gray Davis scandal, and now it turned out to be pretty much Enron. And you know, it's so funny to look at the whole collapse of a lot of the corporate world. It happened only a couple of years ago. But anyways, because that happened, they were going through their budget crisis, and one of the first things they did was eliminating all of the arts and corrections programming in the 30, 40-some plus California state prison systems. The official title of that department is CDCR, which stands for California Departments of Corrections and Rehabilitation. Most people only know it as CDC. Lock people up, you definitely want to have them at a better place in which they got in, because over 70% are actually going to be released back out onto the streets and the community. I say this because having that experience of knowing and talking and working with these men, in a lot of the state prisons, everything, and you know, all of this talk about identity and race and culture, when you are in prison, your race defines which community you are a part of. The Latinos don't talk to the Asians, don't talk to the blacks, don't talk to the whites. It's pretty much entirely impossible for you to cross that racial line in prison, on the fields and stuff. That art room was the only place where these men could actually sit across from each other and actually talk and get to know each other. But as soon as they left that room, they pretty much just all departed to their own kind of racial communities and racial camps. There's been studies too that participation in these arts and corrections program have like reduced recidivism by like 60%. And the necessity for art to develop the human growth, which some of you have actually touched upon, is something that this culture in America is just, I'm not really sure where we're going as a country. The good thing, the positive optimistic thing, I think, is we are more and more on a health basis seeing the necessity for balanced diets. I mean, I don't think anyone can argue now about the fast food epidemic and pretty much what it's doing to the health of this country. And so, you know, the value of like good, fresh, organic foods is becoming more and more seen as a necessity. And I think that's kind of like the next logical step in terms of looking at arts and culture in this country too.
Anyone want to respond to that?
I'll say real quickly, was it the art room experience that you described where the inmates would come and interact, and that's the only time and place where that would happen? I think that also can hold true out here, and it has been my experience, and I'm sure yours and many others, where there's a phenomenal ability of the arts to encourage civic, social interaction. And I know there's an expert in the room who's done a lot of work in this area in different cities. And that is another reason, and I totally agree with you, that we should place a heavy value on the arts and provide the resources to support it.
Thanks.
More audience.
More audience. Anyone else?
A few things I brought up. We talked about the impact, and then you just brought up about crossing racial lines, or even crossing gender lines. I actually have a question for everybody, and it's kind of stepping back a few questions. When you create art, who are you creating it for? Who is your core audience that you want to see it? And then if you could see that core audience looking at your art, you're like, yes, that's the person I created this for. That's the person I want to make dialogue about my art. Like for each of you, I guess, who would that be and who do you have in mind?
Thanks. Who wants to start? Let's see, how about Julie? Okay, Julie? Yep.
I think when I make art, for this particular piece, I thought about my peers. I tried to tackle on as many different arenas as possible. So I thought about my peers and the stats of what I thought contemporary art was doing and what it looked like. But also because it was taking place in Chinatown, I really wanted to, I thought of my grandmother actually, and she loved Chinatown and walked around a lot. I thought I wanted her to be able to walk past and go like, oh, check this out, kids. They're making a new shoe store. Bring everyone here and get shoes and something like that. So I really wanted, I lost my track of thought, but people like my grandmother who would probably go grocery shopping, go shopping in the community.
I think my answer, I sort of answered it earlier in terms of my approach, which is in my effort to make sense of these issues in a personal way. I don't necessarily, at least overtly take on this larger responsibility of trying to communicate to the global audience. I think just by nature of being truthful and really exploring to the fullest capacity, like our human experience, that in effect is, for me, I find the most powerful way of communicating to others, whoever that audience may be.
I think I start everything essentially out of an obsessive idea for myself. And then I don't really think about what will happen afterwards until everyone tells me nobody else understands that. Or like nobody gets that pattern, or nobody, you know, and then you're like in a bad place because all of a sudden it's irrelevant to anyone else. But you've gone ahead and printed like 30 yards of fabric and filled your house with junk, you know? So, yeah, so I would say I don't think it through before I start. But now that I've started, I think that a lot of people, more people than I know, can identify this pattern in this box from a childhood or at least a lifetime of shopping in Chinatown or going on trips back to Taiwan or China and getting that box. And that I'm proud of that, the subtlety of that it isn't an appropriation of something really obvious, that it isn't, you know, this really obvious glaring, like this is Chinese-y stuff, appropriation, that this is like to the point of like you were 7 and your parents brought you to Taiwan, then you got that one gift, and that box is awesome. And it may be too personal because a lot of the art people are like, I've never seen this pattern before, and I don't know what you're talking about. And it'd be better if there were bigger brand names, or if there was, you know, McDonald's emblems or something. But it's not. It's just that box that I love. So I guess that's where I did it for myself. I guess I'm gonna do it for my mother. She doesn't like.
I don't know, this is a tough question, but you know, I think it depends on the project, because some projects you do are very pointed. You know, like you might be working with a certain group, like the Prisons Project, that definitely has a target. But also there's people who just make paintings to go in the galleries for people to consume and put on the walls. You know, the thing about everything though, all of these forms of production, cultural production, you know, they weave stories that you don't realize and that you never are going to know. And you know, you still, so much of our enculturation as children are stories that are very unofficial and unproclaimed. Just, you know, things you talk about, like, oh yeah, you know, don't do this because maybe you saw your roommate in college, and then you just relate your story to your kids or something like that, you know. So a lot of what happens, I think, in the way we grow up is all about just like planting these little ideas and then letting the ripples go out. So even though the dialogue may not be direct, we may not sit down and write a dissertation on what the meaning of language and bilingual nature is in life and everything like that, right now, right here, and then have comments about it, that the effects go out. To think that anything you do doesn't have effects is ridiculous. You know, you may not know the effects, but you know, you can see them and you can feel them. And you know, I give an example. I did a piece a couple years ago about my grandma, who's over there. And my grandma. Anyway, I did a piece that was kind of about her being the matriarch of my family, unofficially, the matriarch. And long story short, the piece ended up with me giving out balloons with her face on them to tons of people at this gallery. And later that night, I was in somewhere else, and I was having dinner with some friends, and a little girl walks by with one of my grandma's balloons, you know? And this obviously was not, so this girl was not the gallery, and she probably has no connection to the arts, but somehow she got one of these works of art. And she may have